Welcome to Wilderness Strong on Fire. We are now entering phase 2 of our fire series where we're diving deep into all of our favorite fire making techniques. Today we break down the bow and drill fire. If you ever wanted to see a complete and up close how-to covering this primitive fire making method, just keep watching because that is coming up. The bow and drill fire presents a few advantages that other methods don't have. And depending on your circumstance, it might be the exact method that you need. So let's jump right into this. First, let's cover your equipment. As with the hand drill, the right equipment and preparation is critical. We're going to start with the bow. When you're choosing a bow for a bow and drill, you have a bit more flexibility when it comes to choosing your materials compared to the other components of your bow and drill setup. As a general rule, we try to keep our bows between 20 and 30 inches, which gives us plenty of range, but also stays light, convenient, and comfortable in our hand. We usually have our bows dried and seasoned first before we use them, but we also have been known to take a bow straight from the wild and use it green. A green bow will work fine, but it'll be more flexible, which can make the tension a bit more inconsistent. So when we use green, we cut a bigger diameter bow to minimize all the bending. We have a few bows that we use, and they come from a variety of different trees. Most of our bows are about 5/8 to 7/8 of an inch wide. Okay, now we got to talk about our fireboard. So there's several woods that'll actually work for a fireboard, and we're going to use a few of them today. Cedar, redwood, willow, cottonwood, aspen, maple, cascara, sage, all those will work. And there's many more. We do prefer softer woods though, like cedar for our fireboard, but hardwoods like maple and oak, they'll work too. They require a little bit more initial downward pressure in the drilling process. Otherwise, the drill and the notch will get glossy and there won't be enough heat to create an ember. We're going to use a hardwood maple board later on, and you'll see the difference compared to a softwood like cedar. The board should be flat, no wobbling allowed. It should be long enough for you to hold it steady with your foot, and technically you can make it as long as you want, but for convenience sake, we typically keep our boards between 8 to 16 inches long or so. Also, if you keep your board at least 2 inches wide, you can use both edges of the board for your notches. The thickness of the board is very important. About 1/2 inch thick works fine, but we usually get a bit closer to 3/4 of an inch, so we can get at least 2 fires from the same hole. If you go thicker than that, you risk losing heat in your powder, as it has too far to fall down the chute into your tinder. As with a hand drill fire, your board should be completely dry, inside out, no moisture. That's why we almost always cut and dry our boards ahead of time before putting them to work. I say almost because it's definitely possible to cut your board and get an ember from it straight from the wild, but the likelihood of that board having some moisture somewhere hidden deep inside is pretty high, even if it feels dry to the touch and even if it's on a dry day. Moisture in your drill or board will cause a gritty powder rather than a fine powdery char dust that you need. One of the most common reasons for failed friction fires is choosing materials that still have too much moisture in them, even though they feel dry. We're going to pull one maple board straight from the wild today to show you that it can be done, but again, we always recommend cutting and drying in advance to making your friction fires. All right, now we're going to cover the spindle or the drill. When it comes to the drill, you can use maple, alder, willow, serviceberry, juniper, cedar, and lots more. Today we'll use maple and cedar. We're going to carve down a maple spindle right here from this dead branch that we found. Now we always want to re-emphasize that we almost always use dried seasoned materials that have been out of the weather for several months. But it is possible in the right conditions to harvest materials straight from the wild and make a friction fire. But as we do this in our videos, we don't want to present it as if it's common or easy. If you're attempting to make a friction fire straight from the wild, you dramatically decrease your chances for success due to that hidden moisture that could be present in any of your materials. The spindle or drill should be about 5 to 10 inches long. For us, 8 inches seems to be about the ideal size, and then we replace it when it wears down to about 5 inches. Using cedar, we carve down a smaller cedar limb because it has tighter rings and it's a little bit more dense and works well against softer woods. The drill diameter should be about 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch. Ours tend to be about 9/16 of an inch or just a little bit under. Of all the different components that make a successful friction fire, a proper notch is at the top of the list. If you got a bad notch, it just doesn't matter how good your equipment is or how good your technique is. A narrow notch is just going to create this buildup of powder on top of your board where no ember can form. A notch too wide can result in too much play with your spindle and even result in your spindle popping out from the board. There are several things actually that can go wrong with a bad notch, so we're really gonna drill down on the details here and make sure you have the best possible chance of getting an ember, which in great part depends on a proper notch. We're gonna show you a few notches that we made, including one from the maple fireboard that we pulled straight from the wild. If you look really close to the similarities in these notches, you'll see that they all have the right width and they're cut at an angle that allows for the char dust to drop into our tinder. When it comes to notching, many of the same principles apply from the hand drill method, but there are definitely a couple differences. First, your notch needs to be a bit wider, which makes sense considering it's a bigger drill, about 1/4 inch to 5/16 of an inch wide. It also needs to be cut back into the board far enough that all of your char powder will flow out through it and not on top of the board. The angle of the notch should be about 60 degrees up to perpendicular. The depression at the top of the board should be dug deeper than when doing the hand drill method. This will help in a major way when it comes to solving the problem of having your drill pop out of the board under tension. Keeping that spindle in place takes a little practice, and having a deeper depression to begin with can definitely help. The center of the depression in your board should measure about 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 an inch away from the edge of the board, depending on the diameter of your drill. You want to make sure there is no lip on the edge of the depression that would prevent the char dust from falling. And as always, make sure that there is nothing blocking the flow of powder inside your notch before you start drilling, including your tinder at the bottom of the notch. Okay, we're going to talk about your fire cap, or socket as it's called. Ideally, it would just be a comfortable rock with a depression in it to fit over the drill. You don't want a rock with any angles in it, since the angle will send the drill to the edge of the rock depression and cause an unwanted friction. The friction should be happening at the bottom of the drill, not up at the top. You want a nice smooth glide happening up on top where your hand is. These rocks with depressions form naturally, and they can be found without too much effort if you're anywhere near a creek or a riverbed. Also, we like to help customize that depression a little bit sometimes by using another stone for pecking and grinding when needed. Now, we don't typically like to use wood for our fire cap, but if you do use wood, you need a hardwood or a knot, and you don't want the drill too narrow or sharp as it'll dig into the cap and cause way too much friction. Again, we don't prefer these wood caps, but they are a viable option. If we have to use one, we put some pitch in it to help things glide along and decrease some of the friction. Fat wood can also be used as a fire cap as well, since it already has a natural resin built into the wood. Okay, as we get ready to drill, there's a few things that we do in preparation. We want to make sure that the area is mostly level and clear from debris so we don't bump things with our bow or drag debris onto the board. We also want to make sure that the ground is as firm as possible to keep the board stable. Now, when we string the drill onto the cord, we want to put one end of the bow on the ground and the other up in the air. We put the bottom end of the drill on the inside of the string, and as our upper hand pulls down on the bow, it causes a little bit of slack, and then we twist the drill right onto the string. You want to make sure that your arm near your wrist is locked into place against your shin when you're holding the top of the drill. This is an absolutely critical fundamental of bow and drill fire technique. You have to focus on keeping that in a locked position, or else your drill is just going to wobble and you'll spend way too much energy trying to keep it stable. Also, your drill is going to be more likely to pop off the board if you aren't locked in against your shin. Applying that needed downward pressure and speed to create an ember is a great deal dependent on how well you can hold this locked position steady throughout the process. You want to get your foot right up next to the notch. You should be comfortable, and it should be firm on the board at an angle that puts your body in a comfortable position for drilling. Concentrate on relaxing every unnecessary muscle while spinning the drill until right at the end when you need to finish strong. Because we have a wider notch, we always try to drill at an angle where our bow cord is not pulling the drill towards the direction of the notch. Having the drill pop out of the notch under tension of the cord is a very common issue, but we avoid that by keeping downward pressure on the drill and not bowing back and forth in the same direction as the notch or exactly right angles to the board. Many times we'll even angle the bottom of the drill inward to help keep the drill from popping out if we feel like it's struggling to stay put. Pressure on the drill should be slightly less when you first start out, just until the hole gets established. If you come in with too much pressure, you could flip the drill right out of the board. You want the cord to ride in the bottom quarter of the drill and not come up to the middle or the top. Basically, the higher up on the drill your cord rides, the more likely it is to flip out and be more unstable. Your eyes should be locked in on the position of your cord as you're drilling, and make sure that it does not ride too high up on your drill. The bow should stay as level as possible while you're bowing back and forth. The number one reason for your cord riding up on the drill is bowing at the wrong angle. When we start out, we always pace ourselves. The goal at first is just to get things warmed up and increase the friction and heat until you see smoke and a little bit of char powder. Once you see that char dust piling up, there's no need to rush things. Just keep your tempo and watch your pile of powder build. We've determined that you need about 5/16 of an inch minimum of char powder in order to get an ember. Keep tabs on your physical stamina to see how much you got left in the tank. And if you feel like you're wearing out, give one final push towards the finish line, increasing your speed and your downward pressure. Now this part is truly crucial. The classic question with bow and drill fire and hand drill fire making is, how do I know when to stop drilling? So here's my answer. I am always keenly watching for that secondary smoke, which forms in the char pile. This smoke is separate from the smoke that forms around the drill and the top of the notch. With all that smoke swirling around, it might be hard to tell the difference between the two sources of smoke. So I always start blowing on the pile towards the end of my drilling to check for that secondary smoke coming from the char dust pile. That is usually my indicator that it's okay to stop drilling. Now, as we transfer the ember into the tinder, that tinder should already be well prepared prior to drilling. We like to use tinder at the bottom of our notch to catch the ember and then bring in a secondary pile over the top of it. Another way to do it is just to catch the ember on a piece of bark and then transfer into your tinder pile. So we got to talk real quick about nurturing this ember. There's a couple of critical mistakes that we've seen too many times right at this point. First is just blowing too hard and too fast. When you do this, you could easily break apart that fragile ember and scatter it throughout the tinder. If your tinder is well processed, you shouldn't have to blow hard. Just focus on nurturing the ember inside the tinder and make sure that ember is well enclosed by the tinder so that it can heat up and begin to smolder. But you don't want to hurry and blow it into a flame before you transfer it into your kindling. Have the tinder at the bottom of your kindling pile and then combine your smoldering tinder with your kindling tinder. So we are just about to show you our top reasons that these fires fail and an amazing comparison between a bow and drill fire made from hardwood maple materials pulled straight from the wild versus one using seasoned cedar materials that were kept indoors. But real quick, thank you to everyone watching our videos, subscribing to our journey. Did you know that the best thing you can possibly do if you like this video is to just let us know by hitting a thumbs up and subscribing? Also, this fire series is just heating up, so hit the notification bell because you don't want to miss what's coming up. Okay, we're going to get into the top reasons now that some bow and drill fires fail. Number one is just the bad materials. Usually it's just too green, there's too much moisture inside, and it can't produce enough heat. This results a lot of time from a glossy notch and drill, from a lack of pressure and just not enough heat. Another major reason is just the cord riding up on the drill and making your drill pop out. Not being able to create enough downward pressure because that cord is going everywhere up and down that drill. Another major reason is just bad notches. Too wide of a notch and the drill's going to pop out. Too narrow and the char dust doesn't have anywhere to go and just builds up on top of the board. Another reason that these fires fail is just not keeping your drill stable enough. Running out of energy because you're constantly battling keeping that drill in place leads to an inconsistent down pressure and just not enough heat. Now we need to show you the difference between using hardwood materials and softwood. In this case, we'll compare our hardwood maple materials we pulled straight from the wild versus our cedar softwoods that have been seasoned for several months. You'll see we were successful with the maple materials, but there's way less char powder, less heat being generated overall, and quite a bit more energy being burned just to be successful. But it's great to know that it is indeed possible in the right circumstances to make a bow and drill fire from dead maple. It should also be noted that this maple limb we used was up off the ground and harvested in early summer. Now compare to our cedar board and drill. These materials have been seasoned for several months and always kept indoors. You can see heavy smoke formed in just seconds, and this ember formed in about 16 seconds. Now, while we might be tempted to consider this an impressive feat, we've actually achieved an ember in only 8 seconds using perfect cedar materials. Now that's a record we think might stand for quite a while, at least in our own family. Let's talk about the most exciting part of the process for us, natural cordage for our fire bow. There's several plant fibers that will work once, maybe twice before breaking. But the reason most people don't use natural fibers is because they break so easy under the extreme heat and friction. But we're about to show you the best natural material and method we've ever used, and some tricks that made it possible for us to get several fires out of one common natural material. And that's coming up in the next video. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up, click the notification bell, and subscribe so you can see more uplifting educational content just like this.